Hey guys, welcome to the Hypertrophy Hustle Show this week. I just got a little disclaimer. I'm going to do something a little bit differently at the end. I'm just going to have me talking solo, reflecting on the conversation. This is just going to be something that I'm trialing out, seeing what people think, seeing how I feel about it. I haven't recorded that bit yet, so I'll see how I go. But yeah, this is a really interesting conversation. Mike is a fucking genius. And we talked about some really fascinating stuff. Yeah, thank you guys very much for listening. And if you do really like this episode of the podcast, it would mean a lot to me if you'd leave a review. That would be really, really cool to me. Or if you want to support me in any way, there's a few ways you can do so in the show notes of every podcast. One of the best ways is to review the podcast or give me feedback on Instagram. Another great way would be if you're in need of a coach, sign up for coaching with me. That's always a great idea as well. Although I have a waiting list. My waiting list will be used in about 6 to 8 weeks. I'm just in university right now and I've got a few more weeks till I graduate. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys very much for listening and I hope you enjoy the episode.
What do you think about this attack on MRV? And I'm like, MRV is not a concept. You can't shoot guns at it. You can't stab it. Although I'd like to see motherfuckers try. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding.
Hey guys, welcome to the Hypertrophy Hustle Show. Nearly just said my old intro. So today I'm speaking to Dr. Mike Israetel, the lovely, gentle giant, very, very hypertrophy. Got a lot of mass on this man. But he's more than just a pretty face. So Dr. Mike Israetel, he's known for sort of popularizing a lot of theories like stimulus to fatigue ratio, the volume landmarks, all these kind of things. But something that I'd like to talk about with him today is one of his recent posts. He sort of touched on his flaws as an intellectual, which I thought was quite fascinating because it's something I'd never really seen done before. And it's very, I think, uniquely difficult to, one, analyze your own flaws privately, but then put them out publicly. I think is quite a difficult thing. So, Mike, what was the general sort of... Do you want to give some background behind that sort of process and post and such?
Yeah, I was going through a really hard time in my life, and I was hurting myself a lot, and others around me. And that's at the bottom of every bottle, they say... I don't know, I'm just kidding. I actually haven't drank a bottle of alcohol myself in my entire life. First of all, thanks for having me on, man.
My pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. So I went to the European Powerlifting Conference in London, and I was surrounded by a bunch of really, really smart folks, and the conversation was just super awesome, and we really got to talk shop, and the sort of intellectual level of the participants as well as the attendees was really high, so the conversation was able to be elevated to, some levels where it's not just all, this is the way things are. There was quite a bit of speculation and, dare I say, debate. It was all very good debate. And at various points through the conference, more than a few folks came up to me and sort of expressed their admiration, I suppose. And they sort of, said some very, very nice things about me. And they meant it in a completely awesome way, and it was taken by me in a completely awesome way. But then I got home later, and I began to hurt myself. I'm just kidding. I got home, and it was like London. I was in London, and I'm not used to that time zone, so I wasn't really asleep. And I started thinking, like, I kind of felt like a little bit of a guru today. Like people have put their faith in me to say the right things, and they sort of look up to me to some extent. And then I realized I was grotesquely uncomfortable with that idea. And the very idea of a guru is highly anti-scientific and anti-skeptical, and I'm nothing if I'm not a scientific thinker and a skeptic. So I decided to cut myself the opposite of slack and take myself down a notch in my own head. I figured, yeah, it's nice to have these feelings of feeling very good about yourself, but, sort of let's keep it real. Something I heard a long time ago that made me think, I wouldn't say it resonated with me a ton, is I was like, never believe your own hype or whatever. People tell you all sorts of things about how great you are or how terrible you are, and they may be, to some degree correct or incorrect about those. But I think it's always a good idea that if you want to be a good person, if you want to improve upon whatever sort of services you provide for everyone else, it's a good idea to sort of try to get an honest perspective about who you really are. I don't go around thinking I'm, 6 feet tall. I'm not. I'm 5'6". And if I sort of went around thinking I was pretty tall or really good looking or something, it would just be not congruent with the reality of the world. And anytime that your ideas about yourself or about anything actually are incongruent with reality, that's going to come to a head at some point. It's going to be a problem. There's actually possibly one of the definitions of the philosophy that I suppose you could call objectivism. I wouldn't call it a sort of, sort of proper Randian objectivism, but the general sort of philosophy of objectivism is that, the world is real and so are you. And if you have ideas about the world that aren't accurate, because there's definitely a right and a wrong, you're going to run into things, like physical objects that are supposed to not be there, and you're going to hit yourself. So basically, it's probably a good idea to have ideas about the world that are true, and that includes ideas about yourself because you're part of the world. So I wanted to, as you get lots of compliments and so on and so forth, and start to believe your own bullshit, then you start to think I'm so smart and I know a bunch of stuff and I can't be wrong. And then you got to take yourself down a peg, not for the purpose of, I think it's good to have pride in yourself. I think it's good to think of yourself accurately as a contributing person, as a worthwhile person. But I think that it's good to skeptically reanalyze yourself to make sure that you're not so much taking yourself down a peg, but you're accurately assessing which peg you belong in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As enough people tell you nice things, you could think you're the shit, and you might be, you're at a scale of 0 to the best person of all time. You could very well be at a 75, but people will tell you at a 99. It's probably inaccurate to believe that sort of thing if it just happens to be not true.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was I ended up sort of compiling a really quick list in my head of shit I was not that great at in the very depths of what I was really good at, which is, I wouldn't say painful, but I could easily say I'm not good at fixing cars or I'm not good at playing basketball, but that's not really my wheelhouse, and I just sort of don't care. But this is intellectual pursuit of hypertrophy and so on and so forth is exactly my wheelhouse, and I have downsides there. I have deficiencies, and so I decided to list them. And I listed them, and I said, Rich, why the hell not just put them online? Because I think fundamentally, I'm not trying to be anything I'm not, and I'm not trying to say that I am infinitely wise or trying to be like, well, I'm right about a bunch of stuff. I'm just offering my examination of the evidence coming in through my eyes, ears, so on and so forth. And we are all mortal, and we are all flawed, and none of us are perfect. Although I will say that my goal in life is to become much less of those things. So I don't take a fatalistic view of the world where we're all flawed. We could be less flawed, and one of the big ways to become less flawed is to admit your flaws and begin to work on them. So it's sort of an exercise in that, and it was kind of cool. It made me feel okay about myself, and by okay I mean it didn't make me feel like a giant inflated egotistical piece of shit anymore. It brought me a little back down to earth.
I feel like it's quite a difficult thing because I wouldn't say I'm definitely not in a similar position, but it's like people give me respect because of what I do combined with the fact of my age. So it's like they'll say, "Oh, it's so cool you're doing this at your age," blah blah blah. Or they'll be like, they'll give me more respect than I deserve because I'm young. Yeah. And it's kind of like, I want people to treat me like I'm 27 or like 35. It's like, just pretend it's the same shit, because it's like, in reality, there's a lot of bonuses I have as a kid. Like, I'm. It's not like this shit's harder because I'm a kid. I'm just onto it earlier. But that doesn't really.
Also, you didn't earn your age. It's
no,
of
exactly.
Strange to be complimented for something. You're like, well, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I find it difficult, but I feel like people like yourself and like other sort of evidence-based sort of figures, people will. I think it's quite a difficult position, because if you're like a famous influencer who just really is a guru and has no fucking clue what you're talking about, that's when I get I don't think they would worry about it. But I think the fact that people like yourself will worry about it and sort of think, okay, how can I bring myself back to objective reality and not sort of... Is the worry that you would kind of be lying to yourself, or do you worry that you'd be lying to the people watching, or do you worry that it just sort of kills the pursuit of truth in general?
All three in exactly that order. Begin to lie to self, believe self-lies, lie to others, and steer them from the course of optimal approaches to training and diet, and then ultimately shit on the pursuit of truth, which is, real bad for the universe. So whenever anyone is wrong, it's not really that great. It's not good to be wrong.
No, and it's hard to admit that, I guess.
Yeah, and if... Yeah, sure. Although you have to sort of maybe look at it like this. You're not wrong. There is no, good reason to think of yourself as some kind of entity attached sort of inexorably to this idea. And when it is wrong, it infects you and brings you down to a knee. You're holding an agglomeration of ideas in your head about the way you think things work. And there's this interchange of assessing magnitudes of how close to the truth, how close to the truth, how close to the truth. It's like a bunch of little dials, and the dials, they can change up and down, and to sort of reestablish your assessment of what you think the universe looks like. And that doesn't mean that you're attached to any position on dial whatsoever. Like tomorrow, if we discover that MRV is just not a thing, I'll be like, well, cool, we can find out what actually works. And it'd be like, well, what do you think about being wrong about all that? I'd be like, well, it was my best view of the evidence at the time, and guess what you're only and ever going to get from me in the future? My best view of the evidence at the time. There's no magic way for me to, have a revelatory experience and find out what training really is supposed to look like. No guarantee of being correct. So at some point, you just have to be like, I'm an individual who has a variety of ideas. I would like them to be true. I've collected them and organized them in such a way that I believe their highest probability is being true. But if that doesn't happen, I will easily and quickly jettison any and all ideas I do not anymore believe are true and replace them or modify them into ideas that I think are more accurate. And that way, you never have to be married to a single fucking idea, which is a ridiculous idea to begin with, to be married to an idea. You don't have to defend your ideas or defend yourself. But people say, look, well, what do you think about this attack on MRV? And I'm like, MRV is not a concept. You can't shoot guns at it. You can't stab it. Although I'd like to see motherfuckers try. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. So it's not like, why do I defend an idea that doesn't make any sense? Like, why don't you attack it as much as you can, and whatever's left over, that's probably MRV. Like, if your attacks are solid or whatever, however you want to think of it, then great. I don't have to put up a shield for MRV ever. Or like, MRV is something you just send basically like a naked android into battle, and he just goes like this, and people shoot at him. And if he's really, really amazing, then it's not, the bullets don't do anything. But if the android gets his head blown off, that's clearly he wasn't battle ready. So all ideas are like that. So when people are like, so what would you say to people that think? I'm like, well, I think they maybe have a good point. Let's look at their point. And you look at their point and it sucks. And you're like, well, so, I think that the reality might be this, and that's why this point maybe doesn't super apply. But if the point applies, I'm not going to be like, oh, shit, I got to figure out a way around this. Like, no, I'm like, oh my God, that's a really, really good point. And it seems that I have to do some modifications of how I think the world works. MRV is not my idea. MRV is out in the world. Like, you have a maximum recoverable volume, whether or not I fucking say this MRV and not MRV. You're going to train for a while, and you won't be able to train as much anymore, and that's it, right? So it doesn't belong to me. It's just and exactly its shape and nature and how it functions is to some extent mysterious, and I don't dictate that. Like, Dr. Mike, how does this work? I don't fucking know. You gotta give some more thought to that shit. And sometimes I have a reasonable idea, but it's only ever a reasonable idea. I'm not an arbiter of pure truth. I mean, in my other job, I am a supervillain. So I do have those powers, but yeah, it's no magic. But when
you're off duty, it doesn't sort of.
Yeah, it's just regular guy.
I think the fact of sort of the way you've come up with these theories is quite fascinating. In the way, do you find it frustrating? Like, so for instance,
they're not theories, by the way. I got to be pedantic. Sorry.
Well, what would you call
theory?
Them?
Is an interconnected association of well-supported facts. Okay. Well-supported facts is a little bit of a redundant. So well-supported pieces of pieces of conjecture, and if they're well supported pieces of conjecture, you can call them facts. So theories actually is like a very interconnected, very well supported understanding of how the world works. A theory of evolution, theory of gravitation. When people have an idea about how something works but doesn't have a ton of evidence for it, it's a hypothesis. So MRV is actually a hypothesis, and so is stimulus to fatigue ratio, so on and so forth. You can even call them, if they're not very testable, you can call them notions or observations, or proposals or postulates, but they're not theories. Theory is reserved in proper theory, a theory of science, as a very, very elevated position. So when someone says, a theory of evolution, and someone else is like, well, I have a theory, like, no, you don't have a theory, Jim. You have a fucking idea at best, probably not even that. So yeah, you call them hypotheses, but sorry, I have to be a dick about that to you, especially because I know you like this kind of shit. So.
Yep, completely agree. From now on, I'll do my best to call them hypotheses, and hopefully all of the listeners will as well. We'll even understand that sort of difference.
Yeah.
No, that's fucking dope. So in terms of those though, do you find it frustrating when people don't understand sort of, I guess, scientific or rational thinking or sort of all that kind of stuff when they begin to critique the theories? Like when someone just says some dumb shit about the theories, and about the hypothesis, and and when people do this all the fucking time, like, do you find it frustrating when people don't even understand the whole thing? They don't understand the whole hypothesis. That's a hard word. When they don't understand the whole thing, and they try and either critique it or they
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Or does it piss you off? Is it frustrating from your point of view?
So yeah, it can be. It can be. Usually, it's not, because when someone critiques an incorrect idea of what you think, or critiques it at like a basically childlike level, when they clearly have done almost no examination whatsoever, and it's difficult to get upset at that because it's just so unimpressive, and you just think, oh wow, like you have no idea how wrong you are. And, something that makes you upset is something when someone exposes a flaw. I mean, I can understand becoming upset at that. When they don't even have the wherewithal background to understand what they're trying to expose, then, it's difficult to get upset. Actually, it's just, I feel a whole lot of like, oh, that's interesting. Have you ever thought about this? And they usually just don't reply because they clearly haven't. They just don't say much anymore. People say things like, MRV is like really stupid because like in the real world, like stuff fluctuates so much it's pointless to measure it. And the easiest retort to that, for example, is, well, if your training volume, if your training stimuli, your variables fluctuate that much, and your recovery adaptation variables like sleep, rest, your daily schedule, if they fluctuate that much, nutrition, etc., yes, it is pointless for you to track your MRV because you're probably getting no results anyway because your life is a fucking mess. And if you are attending to your training and your diet in a meticulous fashion and getting relatively stable at those, then MRV matters a whole lot and is very easy to track, right? Like, you don't come in after like 5 nights of good sleep and great food and miss 2 reps on the leg press at 0 RIR for every single set and go, nah, I'm just having a bad day. No, you're not. You're not having a bad day. You're just not that strong, and you overshot. Like, that's it, right? And especially if you have that twice in a row with 2 workouts in the same week, you're well fed and everything. You ever have that where you're like, you're in good spirits and you just weight's just not going to where you thought it was gonna. But that's it, right? So it's one of those things where when people make very poorly formulated critiques based on a very insufficient understanding of an idea, I don't get super frustrated. I'm just like some combination of just don't take them very seriously because clearly they haven't taken the thinking very seriously, or not. I remember as I find here we go. Lyle McDonald used to critique MRV a lot, or sometimes whenever he's woke up on the wrong side of the bed, which I imagine is most days. And he would say things like, well, Israetel's an idiot because he's basically saying, like, just train until you break. And I'm like, man, it's like, I wonder if he has this serious idea about me and sort of my best intellectual effort, like what I've fucking ruminated on and come up with is like my idea. This is my coup de grace. This is like what I'm contributing in the scientific world is train until you physically get injured. and then that's it. And I'm like, wow, like, damn, like, that's the opposite of steel manning your argument. I mean, it's almost a straw man. I don't know if it's a straw man or it's actually what he thinks. But it's one of those things where, like, people are like, we'll see, like, that's what Lyle thinks of your shit. What do you think? And I'm like, not much. I don't think much of that at all. I think his understanding of MRV is willfully ignorant because he hates me and he thinks the idea is fucking stupid and he's not even going to think about it much, which is all fine and good. I hate myself half the time. But when people say, like, what do you think of this critique? The honest answer is, to the extent that I thought about it, I didn't get a lot out of it. And in a conversation about it, I could poke like 50 holes in the critique itself. And that's it. So, do I get upset when people critique like ideas without a requisite backbone? Not a ton, because I'm like, oh, well, have you ever thought about this? One idea that's been debated by a few people is like tracking performance and autoregulation, and do you have to pre-plan overload or can it be purely autoregulatory? And a lot of folks who are having this discussion seem to just not know about the concept of cumulated fatigue. Or fitness fatigue paradigm, like the preparedness paradigm. They just seem to think that, like, you train, you get better, and then you train, you get better, and you train, you get better, and you get tired at the same rate, and the curves all line up the exact same. And then, like, that's just that easy to track your training and progress. Like, if you're progressing, good. If you're not, then scale back. It's like, gee, it's a little more complex than that. I had to go to school. I had to go to a PhD program to find out about accumulated fatigue and preparedness and things like that. And some of these folks didn't. And when they say things, people say, well, what do you think about this guy's critique? I will tell you, James, sometimes it's difficult for me not to be a pedantic asshole and be like, well, how do I put this? This person has no idea what the fuck they're talking about. Usually it's not that. Usually there's very nice ways to put it and honest ways of saying, like, hey, this, I think I very much agree with you, but what do you think about cumulative fatigue? And sometimes they'll say, like, well, I don't think it matters or something. They're like, okay, well, it just ends the discussion, because clearly there's
not much you can do from that point. It's kind
of
fuck.
Totally. It's like, but you know what they're going to do is they're going to say, because I've done this myself before, they're going to say it doesn't matter, and then in private they're going to read up like 10 pages about it that night, and then they're just never going to say anything like that again, and then they're going to come up a couple months later, modify their views, and start to sing a different tune. I know that because I've done that a bunch. Like, someone whooped my ass in a debate, and I'm like, fuck, I don't want that shit happen again. I better look this up, and then come back and like pretend I know what I'm talking about. So
yeah, well, I feel like it's pretty difficult. Like, I'm definitely still a fucking idiot sometimes in terms of this shit, but it's like I've only recently sort of realized how you should kind of navigate, I guess, scientifically, like figure out when debating or arguing or talking with someone, how do you, like, what are the first things you say in that argument that set the whole thing up? And even trying not to frame it as an argument. Like, man, someone came over to my house a while ago. I was having a party, and someone was like, what do they say? They were like, oh, they just said some dumb shit, some real dumb shit. And I just went off, and it was like, okay, I didn't get mad, but I was like, fuck, you don't even understand the fucking concept. Like, it was as basic as, like, calories. Like, they didn't even know what, like, I think it was that, and it was just like, fuck, mate. And then, do you find it, because I guess it's the same kind of thing, if they don't understand the fucking principles, they have no clue, I guess it's just like pure retardation, and you just cannot, like, yeah, and then I guess you've got to sort of manage it and figure out how to respond to that without being like, you're a fucking idiot, learn your shit, and then come back. And it's kind of like hard to do that, I guess, and manage that kind of shit.
It can be really tough for sure, but the easiest way to do it is to try to find out what your goal is. You can say it's kind of funny. We do a whole lot of things every day. We don't understand what the goal is. We don't examine them. So before you start responding to the person, what is your goal? I had a gentleman ask me, a very nice guy actually, who talks to me on Facebook every now and again. I think he lives in Bulgaria. And he asked me, he's like, the guys at my gym are fucking stupid. They do bro shit, and they tell me I'm like, I try to teach them science about lifting, and they tell me I'm wrong because I'm not that jacked. What do I tell them? And I was like, what is the purpose of telling them anything? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, what are you trying to accomplish? And he's like, but they're wrong. And I'm like, yeah. Okay. Are they paying you for this service? And then, no. What are you doing?
No, exactly. That's the thing. There's no point. Like, it's like I don't know.
Yeah.
You can't.
A lot of times there's not.
People don't want to be taught half the time, so it's like, why?
For sure.
Why try to teach them? I feel like it's
totally
somewhat indulging. I would say somewhat indulgent. I would say to try and teach them, because you're trying to sort of They don't want to learn from you, right? And then you kind of sort of trying to be like, but I know the truth, man. And
It's
they're just
tough.
like,
It's tough to have people not know the truth and walk around spouting bullshit. But I will say that if it is so, let's say you don't decide to just whatever, you actually figure, okay, I'm going to try to help this person get closer to the truth and maybe find a little bit more of the truth myself. So if that's your goal, that's kind of like the same idea as being a diplomat in a negotiation between two warring countries or something. You don't want to go in there with your dick swinging and be like, fuck you, you're a piece of shit. That just doesn't work. So what you probably want to do is, figure out how to convince people. And I've done a whole RP Plus lecture about this and a whole YouTube lecture.
It's very good.
Thank you so much. And one of the things is like, try to find out what they're actually saying. Because if someone says, hey, I have a problem with MRV, the first thing I want to know is what the problem is. We say, okay, so what exactly do you think is the problem? And sometimes, they don't even know what the fuck they're saying enough to have an exact problem. Like people, I think counting calories is a bad idea. And you're like, okay, totally, it very well might be. Like, so what do you think's wrong with it? And they're like, well, it just doesn't work. And you're like, oh, I got you, totally. So like, is that like it just like they've studied it and they've just found that it doesn't work, or like, is there like an idea as to why you think it doesn't work? And a lot of times they're like, I don't know, man, let's just fucking party. And you're like, sweet, fuck calories. I hate them anyway. Right. But a lot of times they'll just sort of be like, well, I don't know. They realize they just have no fucking clue what they're saying. They're just repeating something they heard. And they're like, well, I don't know. What do you think? And they're like, well, I think like calories definitely have their downsides. I think counting calories is bad for a lot of people. So I think you're totally in the right for thinking that. But I think other times it's a good idea. And maybe here's some good, here's some bad. After all, after that, they're your friends. And it's super great because you got to teach a little something. You got to learn a little something. And so did they. And sometimes they'll, to whatever extent they say ththings, they argue back and say, oh, but this, you evaluate that claim whether or not it's right or wrong. And if it's wrong, to whatever extent they tell you, but this, but that, you evaluate each individual truth claim. And then if it's correct, you're like, sweet, like, thank you so much for teaching me that. I'm glad I'm not wrong anymore. And to whatever extent you think it's not correct, notice I said you think it's not correct, you ask more questions about it. So, for example, somebody could say, well, I think that, socialist countries do pretty well in economics and, global performance. And you say, oh, like, that's cool. So maybe that's true. Yeah, that's not what I had thought. But do you have any examples of socialist countries? And they'll say, well, like New Zealand, Australia, Canada. And you'll be like, oh, and they think like, yes, fucking victory. And you're like, okay, that's interesting idea. So what do you think about like this index that ranks countries on their degree of socialism versus capitalism? This example is Index of Economic Freedom. There's like 3 or 4 of them. And what do you think about this index, that ranks countries, and sort of they seem to put like Canada, Australia, Switzerland at the top 5 every year of the most capitalist countries and least socialist countries on the face of the earth. And at that point, they're going to say, well, I think this index is biased and is written by neoconservatives. And then you go like, what do you think about this index and this other one? Because it can't all be the same bias. And at that point, and you're not like, I gotcha. You're like, but honestly, like if socialism is awesome for the economy, you count me in. I'm a socialist. I'm whatever. Like, I love the economy. It's great. Doesn't everyone? Right. But if you're like, well, how do you explain this? And you say it in a super nice way, like, well, what do you think about this? If to whatever extent they can't, then you're like, oh, well, yeah. So if you want to even recap the conversation, if it's in person or something, you're like, yeah, like, I think there's a ton of socialism, like a ton of stuff we can learn from socialist policies and a ton of stuff we can implement and value, and it actually make our country better. But like, I just wonder, we have to be super careful about which parts of socialism we adopt and which ones we don't, because there's some that don't work, like just like some of capitalism that don't work. And they're like, yeah, totally. And then at the end of that, you're probably not going to change their mind right then and there. They might go home and they might do nothing, and chances are they won't do anything, but they might like a day later be like, man, let me look up this Index of Economic bullshit, whatever. And they look it up and they're like, people told me Sweden's a socialist country. It's like top 20 every year and the freest countries on the earth. What the fuck? Who the fuck lied to me? The fuck am I embarrassing myself for on here? And then you look up like actual socialist countries. It's like Cuba, Venezuela, like starving people. And you're like, okay, well, that's not like Australia at all. And then you start to look through some economic stuff and all of a sudden you don't say stupid shit anymore. And So, but you could just make that argument like, you fucking commie scum piece of shit libtard, and then you're not going to convert anybody at all, and people are going to continue to have not so great ideas. The problem with economic ideas is people vote on them and then they impose them on you. Luckily, in training, no one is going to make you do partial squats, I hope. So. But yeah, so it's just like that in training. People say like, hey, I think it's best to have like the dumbbells in the middle range of motion, not locking out and not going all the way down. And so you could just be like, yeah, I think there's like a ton of tension developed in the middle, so that's really good. And they're like, mm-hmm. And you're like, what do you think about like the tension under stretch? Because I've seen some studies that like that enhances hypertrophy. Like stretch under tension also gives you like a fucking gnarly pump and feel. And they're like, yeah, it's true, but it could get you hurt. And you're like, true, that's true, it could. But like, I guess you could use lighter weight if you're going full ROM. And they're like, yeah, true. And then you sort of just don't say anything after that, and then a day later you see them doing deep leg presses and they're like, dude, full ROM, I fucking love it. And you're like, sweet, that was awesome. As opposed to being like, you're a fucking idiot and you're insert homophobic slur and all this other shit.
I definitely it's a complex topic trying to like actually convince someone of something. And I think when you get into like quote evidence-based fitness, it's like the first thing you want to do, and it's like my friend Lyndon just recommended me this book, Letters to a Young Contrarian, and I think it's
Lyndon's not your friend. Lyndon has no friends.
Lyndon's an angel among us. We don't deserve.
He really is. No, we don't.
And I'm very excited to read it because I have a hunch it'll sort of. I have a hypothesis that it will
nice.
cover these kind of things. And yeah, I think it's very easy to be like, you fucking idiot. Have you not even... And even just, like, jerk off with your own intellectualism and just be like, wow, I'm so intelligent. Look at all these things that you haven't even heard of. And it's just like, that does nothing for you. It just strokes your own ego. It's just like, they don't even understand these things. They can't even begin to grasp these concepts. And I mean, there's a time and place to be a prick, but it's like...
Strategic.
Yeah.
Strategic prickery.
Yeah. One thing with all of this, do you find... So something I've been thinking a lot about recently is someone will say to me sort of, oh, hey, I really want to make content, and this is not where it's going, but sort of, I really want to make content, but I don't feel I have anything to contribute. And on that sort of line, in terms of these things, like in terms of like theorizing hypotheses, do you think... I would say to be at that point where you're able to even begin to think about this stuff at that level where you can propose not ideas but like hypotheses that kind of change the that are pretty bold. I think you kind of need to understand the principles pretty damn well. Would you agree with that statement?
I think your probability of discovering something that is correct and informative and adds sufficiently to the body of understanding that it's worth saying, your probability of being able to do that goes up linearly, if not exponentially, with your degree of knowledge and understanding. There's a chance you can come to the shit raw and just have all the right ideas. The thing is, you got a whole lot of people that already came to the shit raw, had great ideas, and those people are probably smarter than you because they're all the best of all of history. Now, sometimes they're not, and sometimes even smart people can't see the forest for the trees and so on and so forth. But I think it's a really good idea to first do a whole lot of learning and have not a whole lot of your own ideas. And then after you start to come up with cool ideas, you need to read other people's stuff and see if those ideas have been explained already. And if they haven't, then you need to start basically thinking about those ideas more deeply, exploring the topography, so to speak, really testing them out in your head, seeing if they align with reality, looking up research papers that sort of tested them to one extent or the other, though not formally. And then as that idea survives more and more rounds of this kind of evolutionary process, then you start to think, Jesus, like maybe I'm onto something. And then you try explaining the idea to a few folks. And when I did this with MRV, the most common reaction I got is, well, that makes perfect sense. Like, that's not even like that big of a revelation. And I'm like, sweet. Just so happens that nobody's ever formalized this idea before. And so, then you're probably onto something, and then someone can come along and completely debunk your idea because you didn't see something else about it that was wrong. You could come to debunk your own idea, and or more likely, the idea will become to some extent modified over time to accompany new understandings and new research, and then the idea gets better and better and better. And all of a sudden, you might be sitting on something that you sort of discovered or were the first person to talk about that is now pretty solid and a lot of other people reference, and that's really cool. So, but if you come to that, if you're trying to come up with new ideas, I think it's by no means clear that'll work. And if you don't know a whole lot, I don't know how the fuck you're supposed to come up with new ideas. 'Cause, if you ask me, like, hey, Mike, like, come up with a new way to, like, write a computer language, I'd be like, why the fucking know any computer languages? Like, I don't even know what the fuck that is. Like, there's no, you're going to make the most ridiculous errors ever because you just don't even know the lay of the land. It's akin to someone very, very similar to someone trying to chart the best course around a mysterious valley when they haven't actually looked at the valley. That's not good. Maybe someone who's done like 50 expeditions through the valley and seen where the waterfall is and where the crazy grizzly bears are, he might be able to be like, okay, this is a good idea. But somebody who just is their first time in the valley, if they're like, I have an idea about where to go, I'd be like, yeah, you might be right. The chances of that are probably pretty low. And then you can also ask them, there's no need to intellectually sort of bash people. You're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. You haven't paid your dues. If I'm an explorer of the valley and I've put in 50 missions or whatever, I would be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, so which way do you think we should go? And they'd be like, that way. And they're like, that's the waterfall of death and demons. And you're like, fuck. Like, that's a fine idea. Good luck, right? But if they were like, I think you should go this way, that way, that way, that way, you're like, oh my God, how the fuck did you know all that stuff? I didn't even occur to me to go that way. Holy shit, that will take us through the, beautiful meadowlands or whatever, and we'd be around the mountain, right? That's just totally possible, but it just, not so super likely. So, if someone wants to create content, by itself, it's an interesting idea because I think I wanted to create content when I thought I had really good ideas, not the other way around. I want to put stuff out, and I need ideas. Like, I just had a shitload of ideas, and I'm like, I should probably tell someone about this.
Yeah.
But if you want to be a contributor, you have to be a deep learner first, and then once you learn all the deep stuff, then you have a take on it which no one else has. Then you can go and sort of talk about it and see if it adds up.
I was listening to the podcast we did yesterday, and I was sort of mind blown at how much I cringed at my statements on my lack of knowledge on the stuff. But I guess that is like, it's like in the episode I literally said 30 episodes ago it got good, and now that's the thing I would think to myself now, which I think is strange. And I guess that's probably some reasonably common. I definitely agree. It's kind of like, if you have no understanding of what's going on, or the basic principles of what have happened before you, how can you begin to innovate now? Because it's like, those are probably pretty correct. Like, we have a pretty good idea that the things that have occurred before you have outlined some pretty good theories and hypotheses. And yeah, I think I've been quite lucky because when I've been creating content, it's sort of been like, I mean, the first 90 episodes were pretty fucking terrible. but I do find I was quite lucky the people I was interviewing were very intelligent, and they would sort of teach me, this is how you think critically, and they would actively critique me on the show. So it's like, I would ask a question and they'd be like, that's kind of the wrong question, here's why, blah blah blah. And I would get that sort of ability, and it was quite unique because I got to learn, which was cool. I feel like I've cheated the system, which is great.
Well, you get to talk to a lot of real sharp folks, so you get to learn a lot. But sort of even better is that your viewers get to learn just the same as you, which is really awesome.
Yeah, it's like killing 8 birds with one stone. Really big stone.
All these dead birds, they had families, James. You ever think about their bird families, what they think? And
no chance.
It's getting late, and the bird hasn't come back yet, and they're like, probably just run to the grocery store. It's like mangled at the bottom of a ravine with fucking rock in its head. Yeah, that's you, man. You did that.
The pursuit of truth has no bounds, man. It is
True.
It's like a boulder that
fields of dead birds can't stop the pursuit of truth.
No chance. And then one thing that I thought I would really like to touch on with you. Well, there's 2 more things I'd really like to touch on. We'll touch on one first because I think I don't know if you know what I study. I study podiatry, which is basically study
Foot
of
stuff, right?
Yeah, effectively, yeah.
So you're a
And
fetishist. I got it. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. We don't put that online, but I might edit the bit out. But we'll see. But one thing that I find quite intriguing about you is you wear Crocs, and shout out to Dr. Mike's Crocs. That you've seen that account?
Yes.
Yeah. Because obviously studying podiatry, and I think there's some issues with the thoughts around. No, not really. I think people have some pretty good thoughts around the footwear, in bodybuilding, but I think the majority of people think about it for the wrong reasons, or they, they don't fully understand. Obviously, most people don't fully understand the foot. It's very complex, and people think it's just sort of like a hinge joint. It's just the ankle and all that, but it's a complex and beautiful piece of the body.
Here comes the fetish stuff.
Yeah, but so is there and obviously there does not have to be a rationale for everything, but is there a rationale for the Crocs? Is it just comfort? Why do you wear the Crocs?
So Jared Feather and I both wear Crocs, and we just we are. I can say we're best friends. We did not come to the understanding that we're going to be wearing Crocs cooperatively. We just came to it on our own time. Our fashion sense is put things on our bodies that cover us up, and so that the world doesn't see us naked, because apparently people think that's wrong, and also so that nails aren't stabbing our feet on the streets of Philadelphia. And insofar as Crocs cover our feet, we wear them. They're very easy to get into and out of, but unlike flip-flops, they're not super slippery. You don't pop out of your Crocs by accident. You can pop out of your flip-flops. And that is really the entire extent of when I wear Crocs. I don't wear Crocs if I have to produce a lot of force with my feet, because they're relatively slippery internally. Yep, the only squatting I do in Crocs is deloading. Yep. Basically, if I'm interested in producing force with my feet, I wear exclusively weightlifting shoes. On the off chance that I don't have them, I'll go flat-footed with just socks, or sometimes really flat shoes, but I really prefer my weightlifting shoes. I think they're fucking amazing. And it still kills me that most bodybuilders don't wear weightlifting shoes when they train legs, because they have no idea what they're missing out on. The first time you train weightlifting shoes and you train quads properly, you're like, oh my God.
I know.
The mind-muscle connection to the quads is completely outrageous. And you're like, this is, what have I been doing this whole time?
It's just ridiculous.
It's like squatting with a belt for the first time. And you're like, holy shit, I'm cheating life. Using VersaGrips, actually. I don't know if you ever used VersaGrips before. Buy VersaGrips and use them. They're the best. They're so much better than regular straps. It's like a comic. It's like a joke. You're going to use VersaGrips and you're like, who the fuck? People just didn't tell me about this earlier. You can grip an infinity amount of anything with VersaGrips. It doesn't matter. So it's like weightlifting shoes, belt, and VersaGrips. If you don't have them, get them. Yeah. It's a real good idea. And so that's, So if the Crocs are just, they're not a fashion statement. If you ask me how I think Crocs look, I will tell you two things in sequence. The first thing is I have no expertise, wherewithal, or interest in judging fashion. And the second is, if I had to make a poor judgment of fashion, I would say they look a little bit ridiculous, but mostly just their shoes. And that's it. Yep. So and they work, and they're shoes.
Yeah. From a podiatry perspective as well, what's interesting is, I'm sure you've heard of the 5-finger Vibrams and shit.
Yeah. It's when you're a hypochondriac about your posture, you wear those and tell everyone that you're better than Jesus, shit like that.
Exactly, yeah. That's a whole can of worms in itself. Yeah, cult in itself.
Cult. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, got a few rocks or dead birds in my throat.
Yes.
My bad.
Pursuit of truth.
Yeah, takes a toll. But in terms of Crocs, I personally think they're actually, just because they're actually quite good. From a podiatry perspective, I actually agree with them, which is really cool.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's because I think the interesting part is I've been thinking is there a rationale? But it's the thing is, the rationale can be as simple as they're just fucking comfortable, they work, they've got a sport mode, like they just do the shit that you need them to do, you know, and
they just cover your feet, man, and they let your feet breathe, which is cool, you know.
Yeah.
I do like a lot of
gyms
jiu-jitsu
ever
and stuff.
Get pissed at you wearing them? Like they're ever like, oh, those aren't really
closed-toed shoes is the rule in almost all gyms, and they're closed-toed, so nobody ever says anything.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like that's my one argument for Vibrams, is like, you know, they're pretty close to bare feet, except you do have material between the toes, which can be an issue. But apart from that, I think they're actually okay. Like everyone hates on them, or in podiatry, everyone hates on them.
Why?
It's like they don't understand the sort of. For running, I think they're a pretty terrible idea. It's like if you're running on a surface that isn't concrete, if you're running with them on concrete, you're a fucking idiot. Like that's just a terrible idea. It's a really terrible idea. It's really dangerous. But if you're running with them on something like grass, like maybe potentially there's like stones, but I mean.
There's a reason running shoes were invented and perfected.
No, exactly,
They're better than just your feet.
Yeah, like they work. I mean, like, I think barefoot running is like interesting, but I just don't.
Interesting is a very good way to describe it.
Yeah. Like people act like it does something magical, like change the height of your arch and stop you pronating and blah 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 blah. But it's like, no, it's all the. It's just like people will buy $200 Vibrams. And then they won't realize that, like, how much are Crocs? Like $40? Or in New Zealand, $40, probably like, they basically do the exact same fucking thing, except Vibrams might have some negatives. It's like,
jeez, that's tough.
It's just
this is a tough podcast for Vibrams.
Yeah, I've gone on Vibrams before there. It's an interesting conversation, though. They I don't know. I would buy a pair, though. Like, I'd wear them, but it's like, I have like some New Balance Minimus. They're just like really thin soled here.
Oh, cool.
They just fucking work. Like,
I hate big heavy shoes. I hate them.
No, exactly. Yeah.
So I love like light free shoes. Those are super awesome.
Yeah, like Crocs. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Also, yeah. And then last thing I want to touch on, because I know we got to go in a second, and if you have to go at any point during this, let me know. But one thing that I haven't really heard you speak about before, and I find it endlessly fascinating, is how do you personally go about sort of, and this I guess ties into what we talked about at the start, sort of being put on a pedestal and such, and sort of having a constant influx of people sort of trying to talk to you and ask you questions and all that kind of stuff. How do you go about managing social media? Like, do you have a system where you sort of try and stay off it at certain times, or do you feel like it has negatives in terms of sort of rational thought and just being a productive human being? Do you find it has a negative influence, and the more followers you gain, do you find that influence increases?
That's a good question. I think that everything has negatives, so for sure social media does, but like almost everything used properly and responsibly, its positives can outweigh its negatives. And my approach to social media is the understanding that I want to be several things, and whatever that Bayesian overlap is probably a good place to be. One is I don't ever want to be mean to people. Sometimes I get sarcastic, but that's funny. And if you don't understand sarcasm, you can go fuck yourself. Good luck with the adult world. But so I'm never like trying to be a dick. And sometimes people are just dicks like right away or something, and then it's just fun to fuck with them. But they have it coming. I don't ever want to be dicks to someone actually asking questions. And then I also want to make sure that I sort of put some reasonable information out there from time to time. And sort of the Bayesian circle number 3 is I don't want to spend an exorbitant amount of time doing that. Takes me away from my more valuable work of creating digital products and writing books and things like that. So what I do is I have to economize on how much input I put into social media. So there's kind of an increasing tier of question answering that I do. If you say something and the question at the end is like, do I have that pretty much correct? A lot of times I'll like it, which means that's great. Think you're onto the right stuff. If you say some total dumb shit, I might not like it, or I might say I don't think that's how it works. And a lot of times that's as much effort as I'll put in, because I get a lot of the same questions over and over. Like, how much do you rest between sets? Well, I'm not telling you that because you're by no means the first 1,000 people to ask that question. At that point, a lot of times my followers will just answer for me, which is fucking awesome. These people are goddamn saints. So they'll be like, what he says is he rests until he's not breathing heavy anymore, unless it's metabolite training, and then it's until he doesn't have a ton of pain in his arms, and then he goes again. And they're like, thanks. And I'm like, sweet. And then I like the comment of the person who answered correctly, and a lot of times I'll reply with like, boom, or sweet, you're the man. Like, please, for the love of God, keep doing this. And sometimes we'll have a little more time. I'll answer questions a little bit more in depth, but I do very little follow-up stuff because you'll give an answer, and they're like, aha, but like, what about with this? And then a lot of times I'll refer to RP Plus. I'll say, hey, like if you have a ton of in-depth questions, we literally have a service where we answer all of them for you, and it's $10 a month. Most people aren't interested, I found, in paying any money at $10 a month at that. So that falls on mostly deaf ears, but a lot of people, like 1 out of 10, will be like, holy fuck, this is sweet, and they'll sign up, and then James and I can give them really, really awesome answers. And sometimes I'll refer to other people. Like I get asked about neck training, and I'm like, Jeff Nipper, just go right to his channel. And they're like, okay. And then, a lot of times I'll refer to you. I'll refer to Steve Hall. And that's just great. You guys put out a ton of great shit for folks that are just kind of sort of early intermediates, kind of feeling their way around evidence-based stuff. And it's like, look, don't do any of this stupid shit. Do this. And then that's sort of like my presence on social media is plenty of posting and a lot of really short answers. I'm always a little bit paranoid that I'm going to be perceived as like a person who's just not a nice person because he's not answering incredible depth. Right. But then like, gee, I have a real job, I can't do that all the time. And as far as social media, like addiction and stuff like that, I used to be really enthralled in social media, and then I got so many questions and followers that I got burnt out on it, and now I'm in a place where I just treat it like a job. So I'll like have a to-do list, and one of them, it's like, make sure to clear all social media, which means I go through all the posts, answer all the questions that I can, like all the comments that I have to, and make the posts that I need to, and that's it. And after that, sometimes I'll like be bored and I'll look at my Facebook and it'll be like 3 notifications. It's like, comment. I'm like, okay, sweet. But that usually doesn't happen because for me, it's been a job for so long that it's not like I'm like, oh, let's see what Instagram has. Like, although there's a temptation to just keep doing the scrolling, But you have to be adult about those kinds of things and realize, okay, I've done scrolling for 20 minutes now. I have zero happiness. I've learned nothing, and I could have done other cool stuff. And, next time I try scrolling, I'm just not. So sometimes I look at my Facebook on my phone, and I'm like, nah, I just don't open it because I know it's going nowhere. And then when I really want to open my Facebook and I'm really excited, then I open it, and it's fun and exciting for about 30 seconds, and then I look through all the stuff, and that's it. So that's how I treat social media management is basically, you have to put a time constraint on it because there's better things to do. Yeah. Sometimes it's part of your job, like it is mine, so you have to do it. And then when you engage on it, just make sure you're engaging in ways that are probably productive and probably not counterproductive. Every now and again, I'll get into some lengthy discussions, debates, so to speak, on social media. Not much anymore, but every now and again, because I'm very interested in them. And I'm interested in sharpening my arguing to convince skills. And that really helps. I mean, that's how I develop pretty much all of them. So sometimes I'll do that, but that's pretty rare. A lot of times we'll get into, discussions that lead nowhere, and they're a huge waste of time. You can learn from them if you are doing the right things in the discussions. If you're being a dick and you're mocking someone, you're just being mean, you're both not sharpening your skills of critical thinking or arguing to convince, nor are you really learning anything. And then I hope you're being entertained. But if that's fun for you, sweet, keep doing it. But if it's not even fun, it drains you, and you're like, fuck, this is awful, you don't have to do it. Like I have, everyone has to some extent an incel problem in their social media because that's just social media. Yeah. And sometimes incels will post like, they'll just say shit that's like completely retarded, super offensive, and just like they're trolling. I don't even know what the term trolling means. Like, I honestly just don't. Like, anytime someone's like accuses someone of trolling, I'm like, is trolling trying to say a joke that's funny, or just trying to say mean things. I never quite understand, like, well, I'm not serious, I'm just trolling. Like, no, you really believe what you said. They're like, well, yeah, like, then you're not trolling, you're just being a fucking idiot. So, we all have those kinds of folks, and it's tempting to want to just answer all of them and just shit on them. But then you realize, like, these are for the most part, like, when, you don't have a profile picture on your Instagram account, probably means, gee, not a lot of people want to be you, and you don't want to be you. And, who am I to just shit all over your already shitty life? And a lot of times when you get crazy comments like that, you just don't say anything. You just could ignore them. And nothing hurts/helps those people any more than ignoring them.
Right.
If you feed the trolls, a lot of times I used to try to debate them because I believe that with my skills and aptitudes, I'm pretty good at it. And most people I can probably put under the rug. But like a lot of times they're just not playing by any rules. They're not trying to get to the truth.
Right.
Like you'll be like, oh, well, this and that and that, and they're like, you're gay, and I'm like, okay, there's no way for me to respond to that one that makes any goddamn sense. At some point, you get into these things where this is like the sort of Lyle McDonald approach, is you just get into pure insults, and the insults are kind of. Can you still hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like we're insulting each other on the internet. Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just if you're doing a whole lot of that on social media, I hope it's fun. If it's not fun, then and a lot of times, like interacting with the incel crowd, sometimes I'm just nice to them, and then they're nice back, and sometimes because people will be like, "You're a fucking idiot, and your MRV concept doesn't work," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's true. I'm probably not the smartest person of all time, and I think the MRV has like serious problems with it that I'm hopefully trying to address and make better." And sometimes they'll like the comment, and the next time they comment, it's in support of your work, and you're like, "Wow, there you go." Right? But sometimes they're like, some people just like, I've had a few people, like every time I get into a tiff with Lyle McDonald, I get like at least 2 or 3 new people on my Instagram and Facebook, like with fake accounts, being like trying to be trolls, and they're just like, guy, you live in grandma's basement. This is the most pathetic fuck. Every single breath you take is the pathetic, like it's unbelievable that you haven't stopped doing mostly everything and reevaluated your whole life. So for those people, who I think Greg Nuckols calls Gymcels, though he says he didn't make up the term, they call themselves that. To those folks, sometimes you just be nice to them, because they're human too, and a lot of times they're just going through a rough time, or they're just assholes, and then there's no need to respond. And every time a troll posts anything, they always and everywhere want attention. That's the only reason they say anything. If you don't give them attention, that's not something they like. So
I don't know. I personally can't understand that. I think maybe theoretically they are the dead birds in the way of the pursuit of truth, potentially.
Yeah, maybe. If the interaction is going to be quality and people are going to learn stuff, right? But if it's not, then it's a waste of time. I've had a couple of people, like a fake name people, who would just like meme my face, or screenshot my face lifting and be like, ha ha ha, and people would like it. And I'm like, it's nice that people like it. It's funny, but like it got to the point where it wasn't funny and it was just the same thing over and over. And it was like, gee, like we're just being mean at this point, and it's not even mean. There's no content there. It's just like, it's just spam. So I've been trolled to the point where it's spam. I will then block people, and I'm not blocking people because I'm like, you hurt my feelings. Like there's no feelings to hurt. You're a nobody incel. But like, it's just, I don't want that shit on my page because we're trying to have actual discussions. And I will say this, I hate fake profiles more than anything in this fucking world. You're not being monitored by the NSA. You're not undercover. Put your fucking real name on your goddamn profile. Put up a fucking decent photo of yourself. For the love of God, because like everyone on social media, for the most part, most people present as their actual selves. Like I am actually Mike Israetel. I'm gonna fucking talk to you as Mike Israetel, and you're gonna talk as like Dildo Lover 45. Well, fuck you. This isn't AOL. This isn't 1999. We're not a fucking chat room. Like, hey, what do you think about the super complex topic? I don't even present you with my real name. Like, fuck you is what I think about it. Like, if you have a real name, or you catch me on a good date, even if you have a fake name, I'm almost never mean. It's just one of these things. Like, if you're that person, just give it some thought. What the fuck is going on with your life?
Yeah.
This is going to get me a shitload of trolling, which is hilarious because I'll do absolutely nothing about it. It'll be great.
No. I think it's a yeah. I don't know. I can't. I don't know. It makes me sort of struggle to understand why people will do things like that. But I guess people do some really dumb shit. Like I was talking to Bryce Lewis yesterday, and he was talking about I can't remember how he phrased it. It was the locus of control, and sort of whether it's sort of like the victim mentality. And I hate when people say like, "Oh, bro, you've got the victim mentality. I'm just a grinder, bro. I work 24/7, blah blah blah." And it's like, yeah, that stuff is kind of fundamentally pretty true, but it's like, and I think a lot of these people tends to be in that situation where they've got that like victim mentality. Like I just started online coaching, and one of my clients he's got the syndrome basically where for his whole life he's been effectively, it just makes him he never really grew much. So it's like all over, everything's just quite small, and it's quite it's quite sort of invasive to his whole life. But it's like he doesn't give a fuck, man. Like he just lives life as he should, like does shit as good as he can, pursues the shit that he cares about, like same kind of shit. And it's like, I don't know, it'd be cool if people like that had some useful thing to strive towards, but apparently not.
A lot of them probably do, and a lot of them are like successful in their other various careers. But there are some of those people are angry for whatever number of reasons, and some of them are sort of bullies. They like to pick on people. Right. Like it's the equivalent of turning a video game on easy and just picking the best character and beating the shit out of everyone. Like I do that. It's fun, and sometimes you can do that online intellectually, and it's really fun when you can do it to like Lane Norton or to Eric Helms or to Mike Israetel and say you took a shot at the title. Like oh, I trolled this guy, like it was sweet. Like it's a Clash of the Titans kind of shit. I get it. It totally makes sense. But at the end of the day, like is it fun for you if you're a troll? Sweet. Like, is it fun for the other person? It might not be, and they might just not want to play with you anymore, and they'll block you, and then you just have to go somewhere else, right?
Make another nameless account.
Yeah, totally. And then, sort of you'll run around doing that, and you'll get tired of doing that, and then you just won't do that anymore. But, if you like to pick on people and you think it's fun, it's not very nice, but a lot of people, like social media, it's kind of cool. Bullying on social media is really easy to deal with. You just block button works real fucking well, man. It works super fucking well. And if someone comes up with multiple aliases to harass you, you can just report them to the police, and then they're really in deep shit. And 99 out of 100, 90 trillion out of whatever trolls are very law-abiding citizens that want zero to do with any actual confrontation. So if someone's really bullying the fuck out of you online, having a call from the police department to their home is gonna like shake them to their fucking core. They're like, oh wait, hold on, because they have this whole pretend online world, And if that was brought to a head, then gee, like that's a fucking holy shit. They're not ready for that. Or you get Facebook to actually like do an IP ban where you just like all of a sudden they can't use their own computer ever for Facebook, and it's like, God damn it, the fuck did I do that for? And they have to do like all kinds of rerouting and stuff, and they might reconsider whether or not they really want to keep doing this. And sometimes they're super dedicated, so you have to find out where they live because everyone has hacker friends, and you show up to their house and you beat the fuck out of them in front of their families, and you pick them up by like their hand and look at your family. You're the fucking last time you're going to see your family if you ever fucking talk to me again, and just leave them. And they think you're coming back, but you're not, so they just kind of sit in their own pool of blood and they're like, oh my God, he's going to come back and kill me. And then for hours nothing happens. They sort of like check into a hospital and they're like, what happened? They're like, oh, I got in a car accident, and they lie, and they just start crying when they're in the hospital bed, and they cry for what seems like days, and then they get a good job at a factory and don't bother anybody again.
Is that so? That's the second career, the villain sort of. That's what you do during those hours. So, I think that's a perfectly fine place to end this off. So, Mike, lovely speaking with you as always. Where can people find you? Where can people find RP Plus, all your other products? Where can people find these things?
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure speaking with you as well. At RP Strength is Renaissance Periodization. Instagram is all kinds of good stuff there, and it takes you to the website to buy all our stuff. RP Dr. Mike, at RP Dr. Mike on Instagram is my personal account. So I do a lot of memeing that I think is fun. I do some informative shit and workout videos. And then in addition to that, we have an app. RP Diet app. It's for $15 a month. It's a digital AI-powered diet coach. It tells you what to eat and when, modifies your plan. It's super cool. So if you have most of the listeners of your show probably run their own diets, but if they have friends and family that just get sick and tired of telling what to eat, just have them download the RP Diet app. It works super well. It doesn't work in New Zealand because as a company, RP doesn't do business with evil empires, so we just
Yeah, socialist empires. Yeah,
totally, yes.
yeah.
Zero freedoms, and you guys all. Isn't it about time for you go to do mandatory field work out there?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Everyone
going
does.
straight after this. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, and then off to the gulags after that.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So the next bit is simply me and Mike just chatting off air afterwards, and then I did ask his permission about this, so it's going to be in there, but it's basically just us chatting about some more similar stuff afterwards.
Yeah, like most people my age are very sort of SJW-y, like they're very, very like that. And like if I go anywhere, any time talk about anything, if I even mention Jordan Peterson,
Oh yeah,
Fuck.
you're evil. Yeah.
oh god, it pisses me off, man. But
The
it's
funniest
like,
thing to me about the Jordan Peterson hatred from SJWs is there's an unbelievable vapidness and an ability to actually critique his ideas. They're like, well, he's racist. To be like, it's interesting. I was sure not like that. Can you point out to where he's been racist? Like, well, the implications of what he says. I'm like, okay, I haven't been able to connect the dots. Can you connect him for me? And they're like, he's an idiot. Fuck you. I don't have to teach you this. Sweet. I learned nothing from that. Like, it's interesting when you hate someone so much you don't even know what you hate about them. Like, if someone was like, what do you think of Karl Marx? And I think he was wrong a lot. And they're like, well, why do you think he was wrong and on what? I'm like, oh, holy shit, I hope you have like 5.5 hours. It's also very easy to say what he was wrong about, but if you don't even know what the person you hate is wrong about, but you know they're wrong, that's one of those, and sort of like, and you can clip parts of this out if you want and put it in the actual interview. If you... That's what goes back to the whole thing of me admitting my intellectual flaws. Yeah. Like, if you can't even know yourself why you disagree with a position, what the fuck kind of guess do you have how the world works? Like, you don't even know why you think you're right. Like, at least know that.
No, exactly. Like I used to be in that
why
position,
is this
right?
wrong? Right? Yeah, you ask them, why is this a bad idea? And they're like, well, because it is. It should be self-evident. And they're like, pretend I'm totally retarded. As a matter of fact, let's just assume, probably correctly, I'm totally retarded. Explain to me like a child why this is clearly a bad idea. If you can't do that, you got a fucking problem, because you can't explain to yourself why it's a bad idea. You've just been flying on autopilot this whole time. What is the Thomas Sowell quote? It's not that Johnny can't feel, or Johnny can't think, or Johnny can't feel. He doesn't know which one is which. He thinks feeling is thinking. Like, if you can't tell your emotions apart from your thoughts that are more rational, you got a real fucking problem, and then you're not going to make any sense of the world. So, a good. It's one of the reasons I do a lot of self-criticism. A good place to start is with yourself, because if I can't see my own flaws, how the fuck am I supposed to see other people's flaws?
I mean, I think it's uniquely difficult to see your own flaws. Like, it's like I've tried for so long. Like the question I'm about to ask you in a second is like, what is there anything you think I could improve on? Anything you think, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, to reach those conclusions alone, I think is extremely difficult. Like, to figure out what you do wrong, like, it's pretty fucking hard, because, like, as a dumb teenager, like, you think you're the fucking man, like in my, this is why I got the statue from Ego is the Enemy literally tattooed on me, because it's like, I know I'll do some dumb shit. If I start to think I'm the man, I'm gonna be a fucking idiot. Like,
for sure,
I'm just not gonna move forward. It's like, I don't know. It's just, man, like, the moment, and like, so many people my age, they have so much ego, and it's like, I do as well. It's so hard to get rid of it, but it's like,
I'll tell you this, man. It might not be that difficult. It just requires a little bit of a frame change in how you think.
Yeah.
I find self-criticism to be very easy, and I'm better at it than anyone else. Not of their own self-criticism. I'm better at criticizing myself than anyone else is. So when anyone criticizes me, I'm almost, either I think they're very wrong and I can show that they're wrong, or I can say, like, well, do you think you're the first person to figure this out? You didn't think I've known this for years.
Do you think they're missing parts of the puzzle?
Well, they don't know me as well as I know myself, almost certainly. Yeah. So how the fuck are they supposed to do that? And I will say that prerequisite for being able to do this is to be self-critical on a daily basis. And some people think that's probably a bad thing. It's a bad thing in excess, but in moderation, I think it's great. Yeah. I've been self-critical of since maybe I can remember. And I always knew my shortcomings, and I at some points perseverated on them to negative. And at some points felt my own swag a little too much, but there's always been a pretty good middle ground for me, where I kind of like, I know where I know what I'm pretty good at, I know what I'm not so good at, and even the stuff I know I'm pretty good at, I know where I'm lacking. Like you know, so it's one of those things where if you just open your mind up, if you can't admit your own flaws to yourself, what the fuck is wrong with you? So like, here's the thing: you could do it in your own head and it doesn't hurt you at all. You just sit in your own living room and you're like, how am I a piece of shit? How am I not? And you fucking know,
Yeah.
it haunts you every fucking day. You can make a list in 5 seconds of all your goddamn failures, and you don't have now putting that out in public is real tough. It can be, but you know, putting it under your own head or writing it down, gee, you know, come on now. Like,
Doesn't
so
really
basically,
hurt yourself
like
or
this,
anyone.
like a girl with a nose that she thinks is too big or too small. Her nose is too small, and she like puts on makeup in just such a way to make the nose look bigger.
Yeah.
You know, you don't think she knows her nose is too fucking. If you're like, hey, tell me about your face and how it's wrong, she's like, let me give me a list because I got a fucking whole list. Give me a piece of paper. You're like, holy shit. Like, you know, if someone's like says, I don't know, it's a crazy idea. Someone like in a club, like she like denies a guy and he's like, you fucking small nosed bitch, and like. Of course, to some extent she's going to feel super upset, but then she's also going to be like, well, yeah, I have a small nose. Correct. That's correct. Like, I'm not a bitch though. I'm just out of your league, So at that point, it's like, you can't insult a person like that anymore when they've come to understand their flaws pretty well.
Yeah.
Like if someone calls me short, I'm like, accurate. And they're like, but isn't that bad? I'm like, well, why is it bad? And they're like, I don't know, like you're short. I'm like, okay. And they got we could even conjecture how it's bad. In all of the studies of what females find attractive in males, height is almost always a really big positive. So what's my retort to that? Well, first of all, it's an immutable characteristic, so I have nothing. I have no say in it. They could be like, well, you're like Russian Jewish ancestry, and I'll be like, okay, that's bad. I'm pretty well fucked, So like somebody pointing out to you something that you can't change or that you didn't cause and is also a negative, can be viewed as negative, which everything really can. It can't really be an insult, really, because it's like, well, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Like, or if someone tells me like, oh, like your fucking head looks weird. Like I've gotten that before. Like my fucking head looks like a triceratops or something. Like, I'm like, yeah, that's true. And they're like, I was trying to insult you. I'm like, congratulations, have you succeeded or something? I don't know, or didn't. Like it just happens to like I'm not going to disagree with you that my head doesn't look fucking strange. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where even some things that have downsides, but because they have downsides, it's because they are the way they are. You can't. And also like. Someone could say to me, hey, Mike Israetel, you don't understand hypertrophy training nearly as much as you think you do. And there's people in this industry smarter than you and who know it way better. And you're just kind of off on this guru thing where you have a bunch of followers that just go like this and you think you're the shit and you make all these hypotheses that are all going to be wrong. I think it's probably true to some extent. So if that person said that to me and like, I really got him, man, here we go. I'll be like, can you get like a bit? Can I ask you a few more questions about it? And it's kind of like the Eminem rap battle in 8 Mile where he like insults himself better than you can. So you're just like, fuck, I can't say anything and else he didn't. If you ask someone, if someone critiques you deeply, they cut you deep, and you're like, can you please keep cutting? They're like, Jesus Christ, I'm not gonna do that to you. Or they're like, well, yeah, here's how you
cutting possible.
Yeah, and then they're like, well, here's all your flaws, and you're like, dude, hey, thanks, man. I'm gonna give these a lot of thought. You're not lying. You're like, I'm really gonna give these a lot of thought. Thanks for letting me know. I'm always trying to be better. And they're gonna walk away. Generally, most people are gonna walk away from that, being like, it's like in those boxing movies where you have someone who's like a contender, but like just has just gets hit a lot, but they just keep coming at you, even if you're better and you're a champ. You see those movies where people walk off like in between rounds and look at their coach and they're like, I don't think I can kill anyone today, coach. I'd have to kill this person. They're just like, holy shit. And usually they just don't want to keep going, like if someone like insults the fuck out of you and you're like, hey, I think you have some pretty good points, or I'm certainly going to think about these things, then they're going to walk away from that being like, I sure didn't get out of that what I thought I was going to. Because what do they want you to do? They want you to defend yourself. They want you to argue with them. They want you just, I'm going to fuck you. You're not right, but they know they're right. You both know they're right. And then they want you to argue a losing battle, Am I still coming in? Is this still audible?
Yeah, okay. I think it's
delayed.
Yeah, I wish there was some kind of way to like figure out your flaws, but it's like as you said before, it's like how fucking close can we get to perfect? It's like we can keep moving in that direction for sure.
Sure. Well, but there's some stuff you can't change. Well, let me ask you a question, James. What do you have a straight spine?
Nah, I've got scoliosis.
Yeah, no shit. So like, what are you doing about it? Are you trying to improve yourself? Like, well, there's not, short of like, surgery that's probably not going to be invented for
I've
another
already
20
had the
years.
surgery, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Like, you're short of like better surgery to really straighten your ass up. There's just not shit they can do for you. So like, should you wallow in your own pity? Like, no, it's fucking ridiculous. Because someone's like, oh yeah, like James, he's got scoliosis. You're like, that's correct. And they're like, oh, shit, he already knows about that. Like.
Yeah.
Like there's just not once you come to grips with your own faults, so to speak, because scoliosis is hardly a fault. It's like that's first of all super good for you psychologically, and second of all, your ability to get insulted. And also, it's okay to be insulted. It's okay to be on social media and feel insulted and ashamed by people. Just let those feelings hit you. Feel the fuck out of them, and then after that, be like, okay, so clearly something going on. Why am I offended? And then you just try to probe a bit deeper, and maybe it's because you haven't sort of come to grips with the stuff, or you're like, I should be offended because somebody called you lazy, and you're like, God damn it, they're right, and you should be working harder. And then you go about and work harder, and then they can't call you lazy anymore because you've written like 3 books or some shit, and they're like, well, next time someone calls you lazy, somebody could be like, oh, I think Mike Israetel's a lazy thinker who doesn't think things through. It'd be like, have you read Scientific Principles of Strength Training? Like, he arguably thinks things way too much through and just assumes way too much stuff. You know what I mean? Like, that's just ridiculous. So there's like, somebody could say something that's insulting and true, and then you have to come to grips with it and do a lot of self-work, which is great. They could say something that's insulting and maybe true, and then you sort of analyze and ask them, well, can you get more specifics? And then they could say something insulting that's not true at all, and then it's just hardly insulting because it's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
it's just like, like if anyone says anything about my scoliosis, I'm just like, yeah, cool. Like, sweet. I don't really give a fuck. Like,
the way my spine points.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And it's like, it's kind of like, it's been a pretty big bonus for me, I guess. It's like, it gives me that, like, I would say it gives me a sob story to, like, capitalize on in a way. It's like, honest to God, like, yeah, like, honest to God, people put you on a pedestal because you have some kind of, like, health condition, and it's just like,
that's always been a little strange.
Yeah, like, it doesn't change that much. Like, like, can't squat, can't deadlift, like,
you
fuck
ever find
it,
that people contact you about, like, how to train with scoliosis?
No, and I'm just like, I can't tell you shit, like...
Yeah, well, also, like,
so
you give them advice, and they're like, what else? They're like, what else should I do? And you're like, I'm pretty sure these are just the main things you need to change. And they're like, what other... They, like, think they're a different species of person. Like, a lot of people will be like, anytime you present something, they're like, how does this work for females? I'm like, for the love of God, did the fucking gender revolution not do anything? Like, females are very, very similar to men in almost every way. Your base physique, your mitochondria don't work any fucking differently. For the love... The assumption is pretty much the same, or if it's different, it's just different on the margins. Some people think this is entirely different.
Oh yeah, so for females, we exclusively don't lift weights.
Calories are negative, so the more of them you eat, the skinnier you get.
So I would also like to make it very clear. You can find Mike at rpdrmike on Instagram. So that's rpdr Mike on Instagram. You can also find him at RP Strength or Renaissance Periodization online. So if you just search Renaissance Periodization, Mike is the co-founder of this company, so it's sort of his baby. You can also find him at, if you want Mike to personally answer your questions, you can go to RP Plus, which is on their website, renaissanceperiodization.com. So what I thought could be potentially interesting is I'm going to actually talk a little bit about my own critiques. So I'm going to evaluate my own flaws, particularly as a podcaster, because I think this is the area that I really want to improve. So I'm going to read out something that I wrote, and then maybe I'll add a few thoughts. We'll see how we go. So in general, this is inspired by Mike. So my faults as a podcaster, heavily inspired by RP Dr. Mike and his critique of himself as a thinker. So I think the crux of this is, for a long time, I felt I need to improve the quality of my guests, the quality of my microphone, or the quality of et cetera, so that I can get more views and then make myself a better podcaster. But I think what I've realized is a lot of the time the limiting factor is actually myself. So I need to improve the quality of myself. And I think this is mainly as a critical thinker. So I've noted down 7 points that I think have really, well, actually only 6 points that I think have really made an impact on my inability to get things across and issues as a podcaster. So I'll read those out, and then potentially give some thoughts on those. So the first point is, I often interrupt my guests with obvious points that are meaningless or simply a restatement of what they just said. And I found myself doing this multiple times with many guests, and I think it derails or stops their thought process. Or what really becomes an issue is when I will interrupt, they will pause, they will stop talking, they will allow me interrupt, and then I'm put on I'm in the firing line of continuing the conversation. And then I will go off on a tangential ramble that does not lead to anything productive, doesn't lead to productive conversation. So that's something that I definitely need to fix. So it's effectively, I'm interrupting often with obvious points that are meaningless or simply a restatement of what they said. And I'm going to hopefully try and not do this. The second point is that I'm often scared of silence. Therefore, I will ask a question to fend off the danger that is silence, and I will explain my own anecdote or thoughts on the question, polluting the point of the question and the guest's own thoughts. So I'll find after I ask a question, I won't allow enough of a pause for the guest to think, respond, etc. I'll ask the question, and then I'll give my own anecdotal answer that will sort of pollute their own thought process. And I think it's generally, it just delays the conversation in general. My anecdote is usually not that insane. It's usually just something mediocre. But I mean, potentially this could be my own perception. Potentially my perception could be that my thoughts are less valuable than they actually are. Maybe they have insane value. I can never know. And then the third thing is, my knowledge simply does not rival that of my guests, nor is it on the level where I can have my own unique thoughts and comments that they can have. So I think this is interesting. I personally think I can have unique thoughts, and I think I can, but I think a lot of the time when we're talking about these things in depth that the podcast guests usually have had a lot of thought beforehand on, they tend to have much more meaningful contributions to the conversation than I could. And I don't mean that as a negative to myself. I more mean as a comment on their ability. And I think the next point ties into this, is this is number 4, I often feel like my opinions and statements are more important or unique or carry more weight than I think they often do. So I think this is effectively ego telling me a story. So I think this is me telling myself, because of the position I'm in or whatever's happened in my life, that my positions are more important than they effectively are, which I think is detrimental to the pursuit of truth in many, many ways. And then number 5 is I think I often act as I'm on the same level of rational thinking or expertise as my guests. However, this is almost never the case. I'm a 20-year-old kid with no traditional education in these topics. So the other one is feeling like it. So number 4 is I feel like my opinion statements are more important or carry more weight than they actually do. Number 5 is I often act as though I'm on the same level. And I think it would be more useful, and I think I've facilitated better conversations when I've simply said, hey, I am the student, and just embrace that role of being the student. I wish I did that more often. And I think it's simply ego. If you've listened to this podcast enough, you'll sort of know what my favorite book is. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. That book really presented me with the ideas of like, okay, if you have such an investment in your own greatness, you are probably not going to be as great as you would like to be. I think it's just really an issue. And then the last point is I very, very easily lose track of my thoughts after I begin responding or speaking. This then causes my thoughts to become muddled and lead to tangential conversation that derails productive discussion. And I think this is simply just due to a fault or error in my brain, where I'll start talking about something, and then if you combine that with the fact that I want to fill the silence, I will just keep talking. And then obviously this is bad, because this is a guest-orientated podcast. I'm talking to the guest. It can be a conversation. I will permit it being 50-50 contributions. But if it's something like 60-40 and I'm the 60, I think that's a major, major issue. Because the guest is the one who should be talking. I'm doing this podcast to learn. I'm doing it to have the guests speak on topics that they understand better than I do. So it kind of derails the point. If I'm talking more than they are, it's kind of like, okay, why don't I just do a solo podcast? If I was hosting with someone else and I had a guest host who, if you think you'd be a good guest host, reach out to me. I'm probably going to say no, but potentially I might say yes. This is not something I'm closed off to. I think that I would really like to not go on tangential things that don't matter. And I think the tangents can sometimes be interesting. Sometimes they can lead to interesting places. But it's something that I really don't want to do. Like, I had to cut a whole chunk out of the last podcast I released with Bryce Lewis, where I was just talking about New Zealand, and I was just talking about all this shit that people really don't care about. It's not what people come here to listen about. I was saying, yeah, it's nice. And it was just fucking... It ended up being small talk because of the way I just derailed the conversation and the ideas. And then I had to really reroute it to get it back online. And the conversation just completely derailed from then. And I think it was... Yeah, it was frustrating. It's really, really frustrating to listen back and hear yourself completely derail a conversation just by not knowing what you're doing and just becoming absolutely tangential. So, apologies to my listeners for not... I don't know. I want to make sure that I have a coherent thought process for the majority of the time, because I think without that, we have nothing, because this whole podcast, the idea is the pursuit of truth. And I mean, I'm still trying to figure out in many ways what makes... this podcast. I'm still trying to figure out what are the exact things I want to talk about. But I kind of think that's a good idea that I don't know. But I do think I need to keep some kind of scope about what is discussed in this podcast. Like, if it's just a hilarious, funny episode, that's great. But I do want it to be... I wanted people to feel like they're learning, but I don't want it to feel like they're just having information recited to them. I want it to be the genuine thought process of people asking the questions. I think... Like, as Greg Knuckles said a while ago, it's kind of like, on my podcast, he said something along the lines of, like, there is value in having the person ask the questions that are very like, oh, so how do you squat? And then they ask the legitimate follow-up questions from that someone's seriously just wondering about. And that's a very useful thing to do. But if you're just asking those questions and you can't understand them in a greater depth, and you are scared of silence, then you derail the conversation, and you derail the pursuit of truth, and you can't get into anything deep and meaningful. I don't know what then truly makes this podcast unique, because we're in an environment where every fucking person has a podcast. So it's like, how do I need to figure out how to orientate myself to make my podcast truly unique, and then also make my podcast something that is part of me, or my personality and me is put into the podcast, without it being just about me, because I want these guests to get out there. I want them. These people are very, very intelligent people. I want them to be the focus. I want their knowledge and their expertise to be the thing we're seeking, and I want to facilitate them speaking about what they know the best. And I think there's been a few examples when I've done that pretty poorly recently, and it's frankly starting to frustrate me, because I want to facilitate the pursuit of truth. I do not want to facilitate a meaningless conversation that can be somewhat funny to me at the time, but then I think it actually has to be a meaningful conversation that has utility. Yeah. So that was my little spiel. I don't know what I'm going to call this. Shout out to Jacob Wren for the idea. If you listen to this, shout out to you. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to speak with me about any of this stuff, message me on Instagram. I appreciate those of you who listen to this part, because it's just me rambling, and I don't know how people will generally respond to that, because usually they come for the guests, I would say. But I mean, there is an element of originality having the host of a thing. But yes, I appreciate those of you who have listened this far. I would love any criticism. You can reach out to me on Instagram at James_Walsham, WALSHAM, so Walsham with one L. Yeah, you can also find me at the Hypertrophy Hub. I would also love a review if you liked this episode. If you hated it, leave a review. If you didn't like it, don't rate me 1 star, please. But if you did, I would really appreciate, because it helps me out a lot, helps me out with the rankings. And some really cool news, we actually got to number 20 in the fitness charts in America, which is fucking dope. Like, I've never really experienced much success with this podcast until the last 6 months or so. And now the feeling that at least for a day or two, I don't know where I'm at now. I haven't checked. I don't want to check. I don't want to put too much thought process into it. But at least for a while, I was number 20 in the fitness charts, which frankly blows my fucking mind. Yeah, so I want to keep climbing. I want to keep making best content I can. Yeah, if you have any critiques, let me know. And apologies for rambling, but yeah. Thank you guys very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and have a lovely day.